December 2022, the body parts of a woman were discovered scattered across a 3-mile radius within vast logging and hunting grounds in southeast Georgia. It would take law enforcement nearly 6 months to identify their victim. When they did, investigators began to uncover an elaborate and unbelievable story of threats, money, manipulation, and hidden romance. Hi there, I'm Kevin and welcome to Just Thought Lounge. The case we're about to examine is a strange one. The details that follow are as bizarre as they are complex. So, let's take a look. The Portal Hunting Club in Riceboro is the oldest in the state of Georgia. Located on the edge of the Bulltown Swamp, where Long, McIntosh, and Liberty counties meet, the club covers a vast 13,000 acres. At just before 5 p.m. on December 2nd, 2022, 2 hunters out with their dogs in the woodland near Jones Road made a successful shot at a deer. When the dogs ran towards their kill, however, they did not lead the hunters to an animal carcass. What they found, not far from the road, was a human torso. It belonged to an adult white female. Law enforcement descended upon the scene and began the laborious process of combing through the massive woodland in search of any further remains. Over the following days, more body parts were discovered scattered in the woods near the roads often used only by logging trucks, hunters, and some locals. 2.5 miles from the torso, a right leg was found by another hunter after he spotted a buzzard circling in the sky above. A left leg was sniffed out by a dog shortly after. On December 7th, 5 days after the torso was first discovered, a searcher spotted an area of disturbed ground near a tree. Its roots appeared to have been damaged. Digging into the soil, searchers pulled the head of a 40-year-old woman from the ground. It had been the only part of her body to be buried. The identity of the woman in the woods was unknown. Dispersed throughout the roughly 3-mile radius in which she was found, however, were clues indicating how she had gotten there. In the area near the torso recovery site, a large black tote was left upside down on the woodland floor. Feet from this tote was a red-handled Milwaukee brand utility knife. There were disinfectant wipes scattered across the area, over a dozen of them. Whoever had left the items behind had wiped them down thoroughly. There was no DNA found on the knife. In the bottom of the black tote was a substance that later tested positive for human blood. The DNA sample returned no matches to individuals known to law enforcement. A second large tote, this one gray in color, was also recovered within the vicinity. This container had been likewise wiped clean, presumably by the same Clorox wipes. After discovering blood residue in this second bin as well, investigators speculated that they had been used to transport the heavier body parts from the road to just inside the tree line, where each piece was eventually found. The remains had not been in the hunting grounds for very long. A forensic entomologist was able to date the time of death to only days before the first group of hunters notified law enforcement on December 2nd. The unidentified woman had likely passed away on or near November 27th. Though the dismemberment and subsequent exposure to the elements made it challenging, the medical examiner was nonetheless able to conclude a manner and cause of death. The victim had suffered no less than 9 traumatic wounds to the skull, defensive wounds on the arms, as well as abdominal wounds. It was impossible to conclusively state what type of implement had been used to separate her remains, but experts believed that power tools were likely employed. Curiously, the Milwaukee knife left at the scene was neither the murder weapon or a tool used after the fact. They were obviously dealing with a brutal homicide. Investigators attempted to identify the victim through her fingerprints, but failed to return a match. The same was true for her DNA. They attempted to track down the origin of a dental implant, but were unsuccessful. A forensic sketch was produced and circulated to the media. Each tip they received then needed to be tracked down. Weeks and months passed with no identification. Eventually, a genealogical history was developed, which detailed family trees and located potential relatives of the deceased. Through this method, after nearly 6 months of effort, investigators were finally able to name the victim, 40-year-old Mindi Mebane Kassotis. They confirmed her identity through a DNA sample from her mother. Mindi Mebane Kassotis was the eldest of 3 children, sister to 2 younger brothers, Frank IV and Matthew. She had been particularly close with her parents, her mother Betsy and her father Frank III. Mindi was known to be bright, curious, as well as ambitious. She held a master's degree in public service. After years working as a legal secretary in the corporate sector, she made a move to the world of nonprofits. Her desire to help others drove her forward. Mindi cherished lifelong friendships and had a loving, close family. Her husband, a man named Nicholas Kassotis, was a Navy veteran who served in the JAG Corps as a prosecuting attorney. He was a decorated naval officer and had 2 tours in the Iraq War. Nick was also a former employee at the Pentagon. After the 2 married in the autumn of 2016, they lived for a time with Mindi's family at her brother Frank's home with his wife and baby daughter. Later, they moved into a bungalow in Savannah with Frank III and Betsy. This was the house where she lived at the time of her death, along with her husband and parents. It did not seem possible that Mindi could simply disappear without anyone noticing. When Mindi's family was informed of the identification, the news of her death was not surprising. The news that she had been brutally murdered certainly was. According to her parents, Mindi had passed away in early December from a stroke while in hospital being monitored for blood pressure issues. It was a devastating loss, made worse, they said, because Mindi had been 8 months pregnant. She was to give birth to her first child in January. Nick Kassotis explained to investigators that on the weekend after Thanksgiving, while his in-laws were away, his wife had been taken to a birthing center to be treated. Days later, he received a call to collect her. When he arrived, he instead received the horrible news.
I was given an address in Savannah. I don't recall exactly where it was. I drove out there that afternoon. It was a brick building. Somebody was waiting outside and brought me to, like an office and said that he passed away. Okay. He said that she just passed away very suddenly, and that they thought it might have been her heart, but they weren't sure.
They told you she passed away?
Yeah.
And what did you do?
I yelled and sobbed. I was a wreck.
Nick explained that an autopsy was meant to take place, but the next time he heard from the facility, it was not with these results, but to inform him that Mindi had been mistakenly cremated.
So they contacted me and said that they had cremated her body. I was extremely upset. I thought that I was going to get to make a decision on where she was sent.
You know who the person was?
No. He said that the fee was $5,000, payable in cash.
Okay. Did you pay that?
I did. I met him the next day in Montgomery. I withdrew $5,000 in cash. And
did you inquire how to execute it?
no, I did not. No, I should have.
story that Nick told was, on its surface, unbelievable. And not only because Mindi had obviously not been cremated. The widower had been unable to provide the name of the facility where Mindi had been treated and died. He could not provide the name of her doctor or any of the other medical staff. The man he met in Alabama to receive what he thought were her ashes was likewise a complete mystery. Though they never saw her body, Mindi's parents had been informed by the son-in-law that they loved and trusted that she had passed away unexpectedly while they were away for the weekend. A memorial service was expected to be arranged in the new year, but that service never happened. In the days following Mindi's death in December, Frank and Betsy moved from the bungalow in Savannah into a new home. After that, Nick disappeared from their lives entirely. In the vast expanse of the woodland where Mindi was found, there are few buildings and even fewer cameras. Yet, situated just down the road from the location where hunters recovered the torso is a water pump station operated by the city of Riceboro. An external camera on this building captured a 2022 Ford Explorer, the same make and model owned by Mindi Kassotis, driving past the building on November 29th at around noon. The same vehicle is captured a short time later, driving in the opposite direction. When Nick sat down once again with investigators, he did not deny that he had driven to a location on that day via a route which may have taken him through the woodland and past the water pump station. But the explanation he gave for his presence there was long and complicated. It all began, he said, 5 years earlier in 2017, when he and Mindi began receiving threats to their lives, experienced vandalism to their property, mysterious withdrawals from their bank accounts, and other harassing behavior. This alleged harassment escalated to a physical attack by men at his home wielding a baseball bat, he claimed. Nick explained that he and Mindi had been living under the radar for years before she passed. They had been moving constantly to try to stay hidden from those that wished to do them harm. The investigation and their security concerns were being managed by someone he had believed to be an FBI agent by the name of Jim McIntyre. Agent McIntyre oversaw a security team that issued Nick and Mindi instructions on how to stay safe.
Jim, yes. The last name McIntyre, I quite honestly, I feel like he's lied to me so much that I haven't met him in person, yes. I've met him multiple times. He's shown places that were told us to, told us that he thought it was time for us to move, to find that place.
What sort of lies he's asking you around that? What do you mean by that?
Sometimes it was a matter of like telling us stuff that I have reason to doubt, that my parents were not actually my parents. Sometimes it was.
So he told you that your parents weren't there?
Yes.
And how did he get that? What was his source of the information?
He had me take a DNA test and told me that the result that he had done a sample from them. He would put me on the phone with people he said were investigators that I questioned whether they were.
For years before Nick grew suspicious of Jim McIntyre, the Navy vet had believed what Jim apparently told him. This included one central lie, that Nick's father, Wayne Kassotis, was not his biological father and was in fact the person behind the threats, harassment, as well as the physical attack with the baseball bat that Nick had allegedly suffered. Nick's belief that his life was in danger was integral to understanding the steps he took around the time of Mindi's death. The couple were always following instructions from Jim and his security team, whom they trusted unquestionably to protect them.
How can I get in touch with Jim?
I don't know.
How would you get in touch with Jim?
He would message me daily and I would respond. His number would change and then I would just switch to the new number.
On the morning of November 29th, Nick claimed to have been directed by his security team to pack his and Mindy's personal belongings into large plastic totes in preparation for a move from Savannah. It would be one of over 50 moves the couple made over a 3-year period, ostensibly for their own safety, always at the direction of Jim McIntyre. Nick was given GPS coordinates to the location where he was to deliver these containers. The man who received them would ensure they were moved to their next rental. When he reached the designated place, which he said was a house, he was met by an unknown red-headed man who collected the totes.
I moved the things from the back of the car, and I don't know, whoever the things left, you said you were moving from the car to this house, wherever they left, like on the ground. Yeah, he said he would take care of it. Okay.
And it wasn't your personal property that was in those containers that was illegal?
Yes, sir. I didn't have this against myself, so I thought
This is that Gruesome. Is your license number on?
sir, that's not true.
That is true.
As he approached the dense woodland with the black and gray bins, he was told to turn off his cell phone, which he did, for roughly 2 hours. The Ford Explorer, however, continued to track his movements. He was in the vicinity of where Mindy's remains would be found for roughly 2 hours.
So you're 40 minutes that you're there, you're at the exact same spot where Rob's torso was found. The other spot where you dug with the shovel, that's recorded on the very same information. The next spot that you stopped and buried her skull is covered. The exact same stuff. Even the next spot with the leg is covered. There's no issues here. It's very clear.
GPS tracking not only placed Nick at key locations across the logging grounds, but also making key purchases. He made 2 stops before reaching the hunting club, the first to get gas, and the second at a Home Depot, where he purchased one red-handled Milwaukee utility knife. Earlier in the month, he was captured at a Home Depot once again. On that occasion, he purchased a shovel. Forensic experts descended upon the short-term Airbnb rental in Savannah, where Mindy had spent her last days. Luminol testing of the floor lit up an area that appeared to have been cleaned of blood. There were tiny, nearly invisible reactions also made by the chemical on the walls. It was the futon, however, that told a clear story. There was a large stain visible on the fabric, even to the naked eye. Initial tests confirmed blood. When the fabric was removed for further testing, it showed the blood had seeped into the mattress. The results on the test sample came back conclusive. Mindi Kassotis' DNA was a match. Based on how the futon mattress was situated on the frame, the location of the stain suggested that Mindy had been in a seated position when the fatal blows were delivered to her head. After Mindy's death, Nick claimed to have suffered 2 unfortunate events. First, he witnessed an unknown individual break into his car and take a backpack, which contained 2 laptops and a cell phone. This was vital electronic evidence that could have been used to support many of his assertions about Jim McIntyre, but it was all lost. Then, in an even more unlucky turn of events, his newly purchased Ford Explorer began emitting smoke from under the hood while he was driving it. Pulling off the road to inspect it, the vehicle suddenly burst into flames. Nick claimed to have suffered minor burns from the incident, and the GPS that he had used to locate the house in the woods to deliver his totes, it was burnt to ash. So too, said Nick, was a cashier's check for $800,000. It was intended for the purchase of a new house.
So my point is, everything you do, you jump off a cliff, you want to jump off a cliff.
Yes, sir. For you, you did exactly what you told us to do. So you wanted full access to our license, they just keep us safe.
Did you tell me to buy your car?
Sir, I didn't burn my car.
the bonds that you got, you described to the adjuster for your medical records?
Yes.
You described all this going up under your nose and your face. It sounds like a flashback from fumes. Sounds like a flashback from fumes from the assembly.
So I opened the car door, and that's when the things got mine.
But what else is in the car with that, bro?
I thought my phone was in there.
What else was in there?
I don't know, I had some random stuff in there.
Is there a check in there?
Yes, there was a check in there.
How was the check though?
Insurance warehouse.
Now, what's the insurance company to do about that?
I don't think the insurance company had anything to do with the check.
Is it the size of the check?
Yes, sir.
How much?
$860,000.
Just that?
Yes, sir.
Almost $1 million estimate.
Yes, sir.
And back up a little bit before that, when you got start getting pressure to move into a house and get away from Airbnbs, the car mysteriously burns with all your money in it. And so you won't be able to close on a house permanently. So was it time to look for a new life?
No, sir.
In September of 2022, when Mindi was still alive and apparently pregnant with their child, Nick began private messaging an author and independent film producer whose work he admired. That writer, Samantha Kolsnick, is the author of a handful of dark fiction novels, including one entitled True Crime. Nick and Samantha bonded over a shared interest in the genre. Indeed, Nick had completed his own short story entitled I Think My Mother-in-Law is Trying to Kill Me. Originally published on Reddit, Nick claimed to have sold his work to Sony for film rights worth over $300,000.
I found one store today that I was obsessed with, and I went to go message them because on No Sleep you also have to ask for permission to use their stories. And they actually sold the story to Sony, and it's being turned into a movie.
Wow.
So I couldn't even read that one, but they had a bunch of other stories that I was like, okay, this one is amazing. Yeah. Let's do this one too.
Within months of Mindy's sudden death, Nick legally changed his name to Nicholas Killian James Stark, married Samantha, the fellow dark fiction writer, and moved to Pennsylvania. He told Samantha that Mindi had died years before, in 2020. He also lied to her by omission when he failed to tell her that Mindi was not his first wife.
Yes, sir.
Okay. What did you say on that marriage license?
I said that I'd been married once. I said that Mindi passed away in 2020.
Okay.
Two things that you told me at the time.
So you lied because Jim told you to lie.
Yes, sir.
Is Jim telling you to lie here today?
No, sir. I spoke to Jim. I'm there on the timeline.
Nick's first marriage to a woman named Heather lasted for roughly 6 years between 2009 and 2015. When the two failed to conceive, the relationship soured and they sought a divorce. Investigators believed that Nick's first marriage to Heather and their subsequent divorce explained the bizarre behavior from Nick and Mindi in the years that followed. Nick had been ordered to pay Heather $1.5 million in their divorce settlement. Inexplicably, the Navy veteran told the judge that he could afford this payment because he was actually worth $32 million, a fortune that he had earned working on top-secret software projects for a company called Apis Limited under the direction of Jim McIntyre. For his safety and security, he had never received a salary for this work, but had rather been paid in generous stock options, which had been transferred into a trust managed by Jim. Despite his apparent wealth, Nick never paid the money he owed to Heather. By moving home constantly, no longer holding formal employment, and severing ties with his family, Nick avoided the court order that would force him to make the payment. He also avoided being arrested for non-payment.
The things that we did for years, the places we went, we
We need to get away from the judgment from Heather.
no, sir.
So you didn't know you were wanted, and I'm running from Heather, and the judgment, the civil judgment.
No, sir. Jim told me that had been taken care of.
How did Jim take care of that?
I don't know, sir.
When you testified that you had $32 million,
Yes, sir.
that was true.
I believe it was true,
So
sir.
you believe it's true.
I believed it was true. I don't know what to believe anymore, sir.
And how did you believe that was true?
Because I had documents that he would provide to me, that I had $32 million.
Did you get earned?
You know, I had worked around the clock on these projects.
So you thought it was from your project?
Yes, sir.
And you had $32 million that you didn't have?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Investigators believed that Nick's first marriage left one other lasting impact: his desperate desire to have children. After a devastating miscarriage signaled the beginning of the end for Nick and Heather, it was speculated that Mindi feared her marriage would also fall apart if they could not conceive. When Mindi's autopsy was complete, it showed that she had not, in fact, been 8 months pregnant. She was not expecting, though she had openly told friends, family, and her husband that this was the case. Although this news came as a shock to Mindi's family, who believed she was about to be a mother, investigators did not believe that this information was a surprise to her husband. On the contrary, discovering this truth may well have been his motive to kill her.
And the big question is why?
Sir, I would never have killed Mindi. I woke up in the morning and I took care of her. I went through that. I went through that.
She wasn't pregnant.
So she was due in January.
She was not pregnant.
No, she was pregnant.
Even at the times that everyone was saying that she was pregnant, she was not pregnant. She was not pregnant at the time of her death.
So she was.
She was not. That's a medical certainty. She was not pregnant. So this is your opportunity here now to say what happened in that room. At that house with her. With Mindi.
Sir, nothing happened.
That's it.
You really don't think you're listening to all this? Sir, I've never heard you. Sir, I love him.
Nick Kassotis, or rather by this time Nicholas Stark, maintained his story, pleaded not guilty to 12 charges including murder, and stood trial in August 2025 in a Georgia courtroom. Arguments from both the state and defense centered around dissecting the former prosecutor's intricate narrative about a man he called Jim McIntyre.
Decorated military veteran, prosecutor, judge advocate general with the Navy, Pentagon, Boston, 2 law degrees. It's not just her family that believed him. Everybody believed him. On paper, he looked like Prince Charming. I submit to you that's what the evidence will show.
My client, Nick Kassotis, is not just an accomplished attorney and decorated JAG officer who served his country in Iraq and in the Pentagon. He is also a man who lived in fear. Relentless, all-consuming fear. His wife Mindi also lived in fear. Mr. and Mrs. Kassotis were told that they were targets. You will hear testimony that a man calling himself Jim McIntyre, who knows if that is his real name, claiming to be with the FBI, told them that their lives were in danger, that they had to disappear, follow orders without question, and trust no one. Mr. Kassotis lied to his friends. He lied to his family. He lied to Mindi's loved ones. He lied for years. Not because he wanted to deceive them, but because he believed that their lives depended on it.
Mindi's mother, Betsy, took the stand to explain how her daughter had lived in fear for years following her marriage. The belief that their lives were in danger was real, even if the threat never was.
Okay, was Mindy working at the time?
No, she was not.
Okay, do you know why she was not working?
Well, one basic reason was she was scared to death to leave the house, so.
Tell us what you mean by that.
Well, there was supposed to be people after them. They supposedly had security, and so she was truly fearful for her life.
Did you believe that?
Yes.
Would you have considered her gullible?
No.
So when she told you she was afraid, did you believe her?
Absolutely.
Okay, and did her behavior seem to be consistent with that?
Yes, very much so.
Okay.
Betsy also explained how Nick had told them about the loss of their daughter. Frank III had undergone hip surgery on November 30th. Upon his return from the hospital, Nick had greeted them at the bungalow, helped Frank inside, and cared for him. After getting his father-in-law settled, Nick said he was going to the hospital to check in on Mindy. When he returned from that visit, he delivered the heartbreaking news.
And he just started bawling, crying hysterically, and talking, and I really couldn't even understand much of what he said. So I said, please come out and sit in the living room, the den or whatever, and tell us what's wrong. And so that's when, all I could really understand was she's not coming home. So,
Is that
and he met Mindy.
Is that when he told you?
Yes.
And when he said she's not coming home, did you understand what he meant when he first said it?
No, not really. The way he was crying, I figured it was not good.
Okay.
So,
Did he eventually tell you she died?
yes, and he did not know he didn't know exactly what had happened. He said he'd been texting her all morning and she didn't answer, so he thought she was sleeping.
After moving them to a home in Hilton Head, Nick parted ways with his in-laws. What happened next explains why, when Nick disappeared from their lives so soon after Mindy's death, Mindy's parents never looked for him. The security team at Apis Limited sent Betsy and Frank an email.
When he left Hilton Head, did you expect to see him again?
Yes, we did.
Did you ever?
No.
So you got an email notification from the security team that he had been in a terrible car accident?
Yes.
Was there any follow-up communication from the security team concerning his condition?
Yes, I believe it was several weeks later we were told that unfortunately he had died. We were already grieving for Mindy, and then we were grieving for him. So.
Nick's first wife, Heather, explained to the jury that she went to great lengths to obtain the $1.5 million settlement from her ex-husband after he testified that he was worth millions. However, in that testimony at their divorce hearing, he did not explain that covert FBI agent McIntyre was in control of his millions in a hidden trust. Instead, he stated that it was Mindy that was withholding the money.
The judge was very upset after he heard Nick testify under oath that he not only had the money, he had more than enough of the money, and that he just was refusing to pay it. So the judge was not very kind.
He admitted having how much money?
$32 million.
And did he tell the court he was having difficulty accessing that money?
Yes.
What did he tell the court?
He told the court that his wife, his current wife Mindy, was holding his funds and that he thought that she had a claim to it because it was earned during his marriage with her.
Okay. And so that $1.5 million that he had agreed to pay you, he agreed to that. He agreed to the $1.5 million in the course of the negotiation, correct?
Correct.
And had you seen any evidence that Nick had $1.5 million?
No.
Have you seen, or at the time, or at any time, did you see any evidence that Nick Kassotis had the $32 million that he said he had?
When he testified under oath.
I understand that. Did you see any, did you see any documentation of the $32 million?
No.
Bank statements
Oh, yes.
that showed $32 million?
They were fake, but yes.
And when you followed up on that, do you remember the bank?
Bank of America?
Okay. Did you do anything with Bank of America to see if there was $32 million in there?
I tried filing a judgment in every single banking institution in the Virginia area, sir.
And were you successful at getting the $1.5 million from any of those banks?
No.
What did they say about the $32 million when you presented Bank of America with those statements?
They never heard of them.
Nick's third wife, Samantha, testified that Nick manipulated and lied to her.
Did you know Mr. Stark's marital status?
I believed I had. He told me that he was a widower and that he had lost his wife and his unborn child about 2 years prior, and that they had both died in a hospital.
He told you that in October of 2022?
Yes, on Twitter in the direct messages.
Did you subsequently determine that that was not correct? Meaning, did you find out from law enforcement that that was not the case?
I found out from law enforcement that was not the case on the date of his arrest, and that was not until May 2023.
As they had started corresponding via Twitter messages, she had asked for documents to verify his identity. He sent her a Georgia driver's license, later determined to be photoshopped with his desired last name, Stark, which he hadn't yet changed. He also sent her an employment letter from the fake entity, Apis Limited. The couple became engaged in February and married in April, just months after Mindy's actual death. In March of 2023, Nick's Ford Explorer burst into flames containing the check for their new home, which Samantha believed he had the funds to pay for. She told the jury that Nick wanted to try for children right away. After learning of her husband's past, Samantha had the marriage annulled. Nicholas Kassotis took the stand in his own defense. He testified for hours about his past, his marriages, and his interactions with Jim McIntyre. Nick told the jury that despite what his first wife said, they had never tried to have children. She ultimately decided that she did not want to have any with him.
Did you ever have children with Miss Bassett?
I did not, no. We discussed it many times. At one point we both got tested to see if everything was in working order, but she chose not to take the medication and therefore we never had children. There was never a pregnancy or the attempt of a pregnancy.
The mysterious Jim McIntyre entered Nick and Mindy's lives following their first wave of vandalism, threats, and strange bank account activity in 2017. Nick testified that the man who claimed to be an FBI agent came to their home and offered to look into their case.
So some random individual shows up at your house, says he's with the FBI and claims to be a man named Jim McIntyre. What did you do to verify that information?
I didn't verify it. Mindy believed that she'd seen a badge, or she told me at the time that she'd seen a badge. I had no reason to doubt that he was who he said he was. It didn't cross my mind that somebody else could have shown up at my house at that time.
After lengthy investigations and the consideration of many leads, Jim concluded that Nick was being targeted by individuals claiming to be his family members. Throughout this period, he and Mindy continuously moved, assisted by Jim and what he called their security team. However, after roughly 2 years, Nick began to question where Jim was sourcing the funds for their rentals and living costs. He had only just learned, he claimed, that a good friend's credit card had been charged roughly $200,000 over this time.
I had a conversation with him as to why this was, why he was charging a friend of mine's card, why wasn't there, either coming from our own money or some sort of official fund, why this was happening. And I made some reference to wanting to speak to his superior, and he said, Nick, I'm not an FBI agent. Why would you think of that?
Did you inquire of Jim McIntyre why he was doing all of this work for you if he was not with the FBI? Absolutely. What did you learn? I learned that he was the majority investor in this company that I was working for. He also said that he had worked extensively with the FBI, and I had many phone calls with people I believed to be, even following that FBI agents.
According to her husband, on December 1st, 2022, Mindi Kassotis died from an unexpected and ill-defined complication or condition in an unnamed hospital facility located somewhere in Savannah.
And but that evening, Thursday, December 1st, I was told that she had died.
Who told you that she had died?
A man at a medical clinic of some sort that I went to.
Where was the medical clinic you went to?
Somewhere in Savannah or the greater Savannah area. I don't know Savannah very well, so.
What was the name of the man that told you that?
I do not recall. And he sat me down and said, I'm very sorry to tell you that Mindi passed away very suddenly today.
Did you ask to see her?
I did.
What was the result of that?
He said I could not at that time. My understanding leaving, I don't recall his exact words. I was an absolute wreck. But my understanding was that there was going to be an autopsy, so I assumed that she was being prepped for that, or she had already been transported somewhere for that.
After collecting Mindi's ashes from another mystery man on the side of a road in Montgomery, Nick said he took them to Chesapeake Bay, where he spread them in a solemn ceremony, alone. In response to the mounting evidence of his guilt, the former JAG officer had an explanation for almost everything, except the blood found in his Airbnb rental in Savannah. He said he had no idea where that came from. Most of his explanations were based on instructions handed down by Jim McIntyre. Nick said that the Milwaukee knife he purchased at Home Depot was not the one found next to one of the totes at the scene. His had been bought to repair a screen at their Airbnb and had likely burnt up in the unfortunate vehicle fire. Another set of knives that he was found to have purchased was never located. This was a 7-piece deer processing kit bought from a Bass Pro Shop. One exactly like it was sourced by investigators, and a forensic expert found that it could not be eliminated as one of the tools used on Mindi's remains.
Are you a hunter?
I am not.
Why would you buy a deer processing kit at Bass Pro Shops?
I received a message from who I believe was Mindi on Monday, the 28th of November, and said that she'd been thinking about Christmas gifts for her brother Matthew, who was a hunter at this point. That seemed to be everything he did on weekends, and directed me to go to Bass Pro Shops and to buy it, so I did.
Did you kill your wife, Mindi Kassotis?
I absolutely did not. I've never put my hands on a woman. I've never hurt a woman. I would never have hurt Mindi.
Did you strike her on the head up to 9 times?
Never. Never, not once.
Did you dispose of her body?
No, never.
Did you dismember her body?
No, absolutely not. Frankly, I'm not great with blood, so as anyone who's ever given me a doctor's exam can tell you, that is not something that is even remotely possible for me.
During cross-examination, prosecutor Lori Baio hammered Nick Kassotis Stark over his failure to verify or support a single detail in his account of Mindi's death. As a former JAG officer and counsel to senior officials at the Pentagon, he should have been well-versed in legal documentation, yet he wanted the jury to believe that he never verified Agent McIntyre was working for the FBI, nor ever sought a death certificate for his wife.
Never got a single document.
No, ma'am. I didn't have any reason to have a document, and so I failed to follow up on it.
You were on trial for murder. Correct?
I was not.
In anticipation of today, in your testimony, you knew you were on trial for murder, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And you didn't bring a single court document with you.
Well, ma'am, I believe the testimony is fairly clear that I was lied to about Mindy's death and that I did not have a document because there were no documents.
You worked for APIS Security, correct?
I believe so, ma'am.
And the records for APIS Limited, you subpoenaed those records in anticipation of court, correct?
No, ma'am.
You know what a subpoena is as an attorney, right, sir?
I do, ma'am.
And you knew that Mr. McIntyre was a majority investor, I think is the phrasing that you used, right?
That was what I believed, ma'am.
You hired a private investigator to find him?
No, ma'am. I hope the state would do that, but y'all didn't really care that much.
The prosecution argued that Nick Kassotis simply liked making up stories, and because of his background in the Navy and government service, everyone believed him, including Mindi. The defense countered that both Nick and Mindy's behavior in the years before her death were proof that they were living the reality of the story Nick told.
You're a fiction writer.
Yes, sir.
You make up stories.
When I write, yes, sir.
How do we know this story is that you're telling today is not fiction? That you have not made this up?
Yes, sir. Absolutely everything we did for 5 years makes absolutely no sense absent somebody telling us to do it. From the very large settlement I was willing to voluntarily give Heather, which would make no sense if I didn't believe I had $32 million coming in, to staying in the house at a time where the state says that I knew that I was on the run. Like I had absolutely no idea. I lived in that house for another 9 months.
As you sit here today, do you think that there was a person named Jim McIntyre?
I do not believe that was his name now.
How does that make you feel?
Angry, betrayed, frankly dumb.
Do you know who killed your wife, Mindi Kassotis?
I do not.
He lived that Jim McIntyre story. He lived it. This isn't a fiction that the writer, Nick Kassotis, makes up upon arrest. I mean, he's good. He sold the story to Sony, but he's not that good. He's not that good that he could make up a story and then retroactively have lived it. He lived the Jim McIntyre story for years before the arrest, for years before Mindi Kassotis' murder. They actually lived like that.
He wanted kids, and he found out Mindi wasn't pregnant. Because if Mindi was pregnant, you know what he doesn't do? He doesn't kill her. Because he wanted kids. He found out she wasn't. Then there's the abdominal wounds. This goes back to Mindi not being pregnant. And you are mad! She told you she was pregnant. You're mad. That's why you bury your head. That's why you stab her in the belly. That's murder, Mr. Kassotis. Mindi loved Mr. Kassotis. And she didn't want to lose him. I submit to you, she wasn't pregnant. Mr. Kassotis told you that he and Heather divorced because she told him she wanted kids but didn't really. That's what he told you on the stand. Mindi knew, I submit to you, that if he found out that she wasn't pregnant, she'd lose him.
The jury returned with their verdict in just over 1 hour.
Count 1, malice murder, guilty. Count 2, felony murder, guilty. Count 3, aggravated assault, guilty.
the sentencing, Nick's parents stood up on his behalf. Despite years of estrangement and the blame that had been placed on them as the alleged perpetrators of years of harassment, they told the judge that their son was innocent.
He is truly a wonderful, kind person. And from the beginning, when this all broke, we never believed that this was possible. And we still do not believe that this is possible. We know the person sitting there, our son, as a kind and gentle person that would not do this. And there's really no evidence that showed that he did.
He is a good and kind and gentle person. The thought that he could take someone else's life is just unbelievable, honestly. I respect the jury's work that they did, but they got this one wrong. I'm sorry.
The state requested a sentence of life without the possibility of parole. Morgan Paddock, one of Mindy's closest friends, spoke of the pain of processing both Mindy's loss and the manipulation that her friend must have suffered during her marriage to Nick Kassotis. Mindy was more than the woman found in the woods, and she was much more than a character in her husband's twisted story.
But Mindy was so much more than what happened to her. She was a bright light, vibrant, generous, funny, caring, a defender of others, passionate, trustworthy, and so much more. If anyone in her life would have been in her position, she would be standing right here today speaking for them. Nick, you slowly and strategically tried to dampen her light, isolating her from the people she deeply loved, robbing her of time, laughter, creating memories and peace, always living in fear and isolation. She loved you and trusted you to tell her the truth, to protect her, to live out your marriage vows, and yet you were the one that she needed protection from.
In August 2025, Nicholas Kassotis Stark was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole, plus 25 years.